In reference to this, it is written, "And Saul was sitting in Giva under the tree in Ramah." Now, what is the relevance of Giva, which is in Benjamin's territory, to Ramah, which is in the mountains of Ephraim? It must be that the verse serves to teach you the following. Who brought it about that Saul, a Benjaminite, dwelled in Giva for 2.5 years? It was brought about by the prayer of Samuel the Ramahite.
Okay, let's stop there. Okay. Anyone have a sense of what this might mean?
Two different tribes.
So we first of all, we quote a verse from, I guess, chapter 22. I'm going to read you the translation here.
22:6.
22:6, right? So when Saul heard that David and the men with him had been located, here's our quote, and notice how it differs. Saul was then in Giva, sitting under the tamarisk tree on the height, spear in hand with all his courtiers in attendance upon him.
Oh, this is in the Battle of Goliath?
No, this is after that.
No, this is when Saul's hunting for David, who is on the run. But what was the difference between what I read from this translation and what we had? I'll do it again. Saul was then in Giva, sitting under the tamarisk tree on the height.
There's no Ramah.
Right, so what is Ramah? So Ramah is a place. There is a place called Ramah in Ephraim. But Ramah also is a Hebrew word that means a high place. And so JPS has translated this passage that, Giva, Ramah's not talking about a place. Ramah's talking about Saul was sitting on top of a hill. Right, that's what our translation here says. But the Gemara is reading that a little bit differently, right? It's reading Ramah not as as the proper noun, right? As the place, and so how can the text have Saul in two different places at the same time? All right. So, and what's the answer?
He's referring by metaphor, if you will, to Samuel, who is the Ramahite. So it's by extension.
All right. So ba Giva tachat ha'eshel, in Giva underneath this eshel tree, the tamarisk tree, and ba Ramah is not in Ramah. It's by the person from Ramah, by the Ramathite, which is Samuel. Okay. So good. So and then the Gemara goes on to tell us why. What did Samuel do to cause Saul to go to Giva?
Perhaps they're arguing with God.
Yeah. The Gemara asks, what would God have brought about Samuel's death purely for the sake of allowing David to rule?
Don't jump ahead yet.
Okay, sorry.
So based on what we have, I think we have an answer. So why was, it says that who brought it about that Saul, a Benjaminite, dwelled in Giva for 2.5 years? The prayer of Samuel the Ramathite, right? So Samuel gave a prayer that is the meaning behind this verse. So what was Samuel's prayer? When did?
I think the argument with God, or when he asked God, don't kill
Right.
him.
So I think this is going back to that kind of this gap in this question of what happened that night. So Samuel prayed, and somehow that got Saul an extra 2.5 years of life, where he stayed in Giva, where there's this kind of dispute over the throne.
Now, is it possible, when they're talking about the translation of the word as a high place, could it also be potentially metaphoric, that Saul was still in a period when he wasn't paranoid or was in a certain state of grace?
I don't think so, because the term Ramah, it's got a definite term. There are Ramot. There's a neighborhood outside of Jerusalem called Ramot, right? It's in the hills, right? So there are high places, and the word Ramah is used to describe them all over the land. And the pagan rites, they would offer sacrifices on the high places. They would have these sacred trees at the top of hills. So it's a common word. So, all right, so let's go on.
Okay. So the Gemara asks, does one man get pushed aside for the sake of another? Would God have brought about Samuel's death purely for the sake of allowing David to rule? The Gemara answers, yes, such a phenomenon can occur. As Rav Shmuel ben Nachmani said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, what is the meaning of that which is written, Therefore I have hewn out my word by the prophets, I have killed them with the words of my mouth. It does not say that they were killed as a result of their deeds, i.e. on account of some wrongdoing. Rather it says, with the words of my mouth, i.e. due to a divine decree. Thus we see that one man can be pushed aside to make way for another, where this is necessitated by divine decree, such as in the case of Samuel and David.
All right, so our first question, does one man get pushed aside for the sake of another? Which I think is related to this, the earlier passage where it talks about one reign may not encroach upon another even by a hairbreadth, perhaps, or even the discussion about if Saul were to be killed, it somehow would impinge upon, it would be a kind of a disgrace to Samuel, or if Samuel were to die young, he would be maligned. So I think that this question is really trying to figure out all of these details, because still the fact is that God making Samuel age prematurely and then die young, you know, whatever people see, it's not good for Samuel, right? So how can this be for someone as righteous as Samuel? All right. Now I want to point out something also, that if you notice who is giving this answer? So it's Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, right? A later Amora. In the name of Rabbi, and then we get Yochanan in parentheses, Jonas Tan in brackets. So, what are the brackets and the parentheses?
Shmuel is
Wait.
quoting Yochanan, is quoting Yonatan.
Not quite. So here, we've talked before about how there are, until the printing press, Talmud was being written down, and that there are differences, and sometimes very significant differences between texts. Errors creep in, things get left out, things get added, and when the editors of the printing press start to collect these things, and they're collecting as many manuscripts as they can get their hands on, they've got divergent texts. And in some cases, they make decisions to correct texts. And so what will often happen, and this is, and what we, when you get a Gemara today, it's based on the Vilna edition, which is in the late 19th century. And the editors there really knew their stuff. So they went through and they made a lot of these corrections, and they used parentheses and brackets to indicate certain things. So the standard rule is, if you're reading the Gemara and something is in parentheses, that is something that needs to not be read, right? They received that in the kind of the text that they had received, but they're telling us this should not be here. Don't read this word. Brackets is when they put a word in, right? They say, this word is missing. We're going to correct the text and put this word back in. So if you study in the Gemara, you'll see parentheses and brackets sometimes, but then sometimes you'll also see like an asterisk or whatever this particular edition is using to indicate it, with a note on the side saying it needs to be the following word. So what we're saying here is that they've received an edition that says Yochanan, but it's not correct. That, in fact, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani is quoting Yonatan. Now, remember, originally the original answer to Rabbi Nachman's question was a drash of Rabbi Yochanan, saying, old age came upon him prematurely. So it would seem to make sense to put Rabbi Yochanan back in this text. We're going to kind of further elaborate. The Gemara is trying to explain what Rabbi Yochanan might have meant by giving us more context. So if Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani is going to quote a rabbi whose name begins with a yud, Yochanan would, he'd be a good person. If we can say that this was actually something Rabbi Yochanan said, that gives even more support that this is what he meant when he said old age jumped upon him. But in fact, that is